Chaos in the Big 12 on Saturday. 3 of the top teams in the conference all lost, including Houston, in overtime to Texas Tech. A huge win for the Red Raiders. Iowa State, meantime, falls to Kansas State, snapping the Cyclones' 29-game home winning streak. We mentioned Houston snapping the Cougars' 33-game home winning streak. And Kansas blows a 21-point lead to Baylor, the largest blown lead in school history. And for all of that, that is the issue with the Big 12 on this day. It was chaos. So we welcome in CBS Sports bracketologist Jerry Palm, and back here at CBS Sports senior writer Matt Norlander. Jerry, take us through the fallout from a chaotic Saturday in the Big 12, because some teams were hurt and some teams were helped.
Yeah, probably the one that was least impactful of those 3 games was Texas Tech winning at Houston. I mean, obviously, Houston, these are 2 tournament teams, so it's not, we're talking about some seed impact maybe in the end, but it's not the major upset that those other 2 were. Kansas blowing that lead to Baylor. Baylor really needed that win. So that's a huge win for Baylor, for their tournament prospects long term, to get that win over Kansas. But for Kansas, you know, this is a team that's really kind of struggled. They've already lost twice at home this year, to West Virginia and to Houston. They should have probably lost to UCF the other day, and now they blow a big lead and lose at Baylor. This team hasn't got the mojo that we really thought the preseason #1 team was going to have. And then Iowa State, I mean, this is just a big mess. I mean, that's a quad 3 loss to Kansas State. They're the only team that started the day in the top 25 of the net that now has a quad 3 loss. It's going to drop them off the top line for sure. And if it wasn't for the fact that the 5 teams or 4 teams behind them, all of the 2s also lost today, they might drop even all the way down to a 3.
I got to talk Kansas here real quick, Jerry and Akeem. I wrote a column for CBSSports.com. You can read that on your CBS Sports app as you watch this. Kansas has dominated the Big 12 forever, and Bill Self put on a run of consecutive first-place finishes that lasted more than a decade that I truly don't think we will ever see again for as long as they play college basketball on this planet at the high major level. And yet with this loss, the biggest loss in school history, biggest blown lead, that is, I do think that Kansas has entered into really the low point in Bill Self's Hall of Fame tenure. And just to be clear, the low point for Kansas is the high point for 96% of all other programs in the country. But Kansas is now pacing toward its 2nd straight season, finishing outside the top 3 in the Big 12. Guys, it hasn't had back-to-back years outside the top 3 in league play since the early 1980s. It's kind of astounding to see what Kansas has found itself, the position it's found itself in, and it will certainly be interesting over the next 4 to 5 weeks to see how Self, who is a great coach, how much he decides to play Flory Badunga, what we get out of Dewan Harris Jr. KJ Adams seems to be a puzzle piece that can't quite fit as well as he has in years past. A lot going on with the Jayhawks. I thought the Baylor win was big, but on a huge day of a lot of big results, Hakeem, I thought Kansas losing the way it did was about as noisy and meaningful as anything we saw in the sport.
And now Kansas has a date with Iowa State on Monday. So now you've got these 2 teams in our world fighting for seeding, but they're just trying to get a win. When you look at that and the ramifications of that game, perhaps Iowa State was looking ahead facing Kansas State at home.
Potentially that might be the case. I find this matchup to be super intriguing because Iowa State, the idea that this Cyclones team could potentially drop 2 games of such wild, differently wild significance, but now with Kansas on the docket here, and now ISU needing to go and really pick off a big win to continue to help its 1 seed resume. There's still plenty, listen, there's plenty of time here, but when there are other teams that are floating outside that 1 seed conversation or in the thick of it, like take Duke, for example, and how well they've done. Iowa State, I don't know if it really has as much leash for a 1 seed, Jerry, as you might think. This game, I think, looms larger than some people might realize once we get to March and they have to sort out that top line on Selection Sunday.
Yeah, Iowa State beat Kansas earlier in the season at home. Now they head to Kansas for their second matchup. And we talked about Baylor and what a big win it was for them. They entered the day among Jerry's last four in. They get the comeback win against Kansas, rallied from 21 down. North Carolina, meantime, gets crushed by Duke, falling to 13-10, 6-5 in the ACC. A far cry from what they did last season. They were among Jerry's first four out coming into the day. They were 29-8 last season, 17-3 in the ACC, lost in the Sweet 16 to Alabama. Jerry, where do you have the Tar Heels in your bracketology at this point in the season?
Yeah, 13-10, 1-9 in quad one games. Teams with either of those marks, let alone both of them, don't make the NCAA tournament. North Carolina won't even be on my board when I'm doing my bracket Monday because that's just not good enough. Now, there's still a month and a half to go, but they need quad one wins, and they only have two left on the regular season at Clemson and the season finale home at Duke, and then, of course, the conference tournament's an opportunity as well. But they also can't afford to lose the other game. They can't afford to take quad two, quad three, quad four losses when your quad one record is so bad. And they already have a quad two loss at home to Stanford. So there's not a lot of margin for error anymore for North Carolina just to make the NCAA tournament. They're going to need to get better in a hurry and get more consistent with the rest of this schedule if they're going to be playing for the national championship when that tournament starts.
UNC has lost 4 of its last 5, Matt. Of course, you can earn an invitation by winning your conference tournament. We saw NC State do that last year in the ACC. What's your biggest question mark for this North Carolina program? Because I thought on the Ion College Basketball podcast, Gary brought up a really good question to you, and this is a really deep question as well. North Carolina is one of the best programs in the country. They have been for so long, one of the winningest programs in college basketball history. Do they have one of the best college coaches in the sport right now?
No, they don't, and that's a big picture question that North Carolina's powers that be are going to probably have to take a really hard, long look at as we get deeper into the season. UNC had a real opportunity, against Duke. We've seen inferior UNC teams go into that building many times before and beat really good Duke teams when that was not the expected outcome. And here, game was never in doubt within the first 2 minutes. Yeah, UNC went on an 18-2 run in the second half to cut the lead to 16. It didn't really wind up meaning all that much. Carolina is now going to be a team that it's on tenterhooks. I mean, day in, day out. Big picture, yeah, there's questions about Hubert Davis and the coaching situation and how that goes as we head into March here. But UNC is a team that was preseason top 10. I just talked about Kansas. That was the preseason #1 team for the second year in a row, and it's having some issues here. It pales in comparison to what Carolina is going through. Again, now pacing toward missing the NCAA tournament for the second time in 3 years. And 2 years ago, of course, UNC was the preseason #1, the only team ever to be preseason #1 and not make the tournament in the same season.
43 days until Selection Sunday. Jerry's 1 seeds entering the day. Auburn on pace for the #1 overall seed. 13 quad 1 wins this season, 5 more than any other D1 team. Duke owns the nation's longest winning streak at 15 as they beat North Carolina. Alabama takes care of business against Georgia, while Iowa State, as we mentioned, gets upset at home against Kansas State, snapping their 29-game home winning streak. So we've got risers and fallers. Louisville was a team that lost today to Georgia Tech. We saw some of these teams go on the road, like Michigan State, become ranked roadkill. There were some games that needed to be won by these teams. As we talk about the risers and fallers, Jerry, who's your biggest riser on this day?
Oh, the biggest riser is probably going to be Baylor. Because Baylor got a huge win over Kansas today, and they have, as one of the last 4 in, the most that they can move up. A win like that impacts a team in that part of the bracket more than, say, Tennessee beating Florida does way up at the top part of the bracket. Now, Tennessee is going to move up as well, but that Baylor win over Kansas is huge because of the security it provides them going forward, at least a little bit, because we still have a lot of season to play as they're trying to make a run to get into the NCAA tournament.
Tell you what, big riser for me has to be Missouri.
Yeah.
Missouri goes to Mississippi State. So we call a seed line bump, kids. 88-61 win on the road, now 17-4. Dennis Gates' about face guiding that program after they went 0-18 in league play and then didn't even win an SEC tournament game a season ago. So 0-19 against league foes last season, and now you've got Mizzou creeping up on top. I have to give a shout out to Dennis Gates, who has done a wonderful job and is in a very loaded field and a lot of good candidates here in the first week of February for National Coach of the Year. Dennis Gates, Hakeem, absolutely deserves to be sitting at that table.
Jerry, I'm curious about Yukon, right? Another loss on this night to Marquette, and they had a 20-point lead in this game, and then they hang on to win. Got a great performance from solo ball without Liam McNeely still. Had they lost this game, were we looking at a situation where they were on the bubble?
I don't know if I'd go that far, because I don't think losing at Marquette is really that damaging. You know, now that's a team that I've got in the middle of the bracket, so the win is really nice for them. I mean, that's a great win. That's going to give them some juice. But I don't think losing at Marquette, I mean, it would have hurt to blow a 20-point lead, but the committee doesn't care about blow a 20-point lead. They see a loss on the road to a top-level team in Marquette, and they say, well, okay, that's what you'd expect. It's not really that damaging. So I wouldn't have thought of Yukon as really hurting their tournament hopes materially by losing to Marquette, but the win really helps. This is a team that's been inconsistent, had that lost weekend in Maui. They've been better since then, but still don't look like the kind of a team that's going to compete for a third consecutive championship. But it's in them, I think. But they've got to get right and get some momentum going. And this win at Marquette could really help with that, I think.
Yeah, and St. John's got to deal with both of these coming up. They play, Marquette plays St. John's on Tuesday, and then St. John's has to play Yukon on Friday. So that's going to be some fun games in the Big East. All right, now for your biggest faller, Jerry. Who didn't help their resume here on this first Saturday in February?
Oh, it's got to be Iowa State. I mean, first of all, it's their second loss in a row. And then as Matt mentioned, they've got Kansas coming up. So that could be 3. But this one really hurts because Kansas State's a quad 3 loss, and they were never really in this game. On their home floor, no less. I mean, this was, I guess it was a trap game because it came between Arizona and Kansas. But, boy, they fell into it big time, and this is one that's going to hurt in terms of their seeding. Obviously, we're not talking about a team that's going to miss the tournament unless the wheels really come off. But this is a loss where this is the difference between maybe you're a number 1 or a 2 seed and maybe a 4 or 5 in the end, and especially if this turns into now a 3-game losing streak and now you're really struggling and starting to maybe fight confidence a little bit.
A reminder to our viewers that teams that are ranked in the AP Top 25, that does not have correlation, obviously, with seeding. You see that represented in Palm's bracket that he updates frequently at CBSSports.com and on your CBS Sports app. And on that note, Vanderbilt's a team that cracked into the AP Top 25 this week for the first time in almost a decade. Vandy actually was in a competitive game against Oklahoma and then got absolutely dump trucked in the final 15 minutes of that game and winds up losing 97-67. Vandy's still in that tournament conversation, but it's a fascinating resume. Understandable loss on the road against an Oklahoma team that's also going to be punching up to trying to get into the bracket, but that was a damaging defeat from a metric standpoint, and certainly after cracking into the rankings, you would have hoped that Vanderbilt would have been able to sustain some success a bit more than it has been able to as of late. That's another loss. Keep an eye on Vanderbilt moving forward. That could be a team that really needs to pick up some key wins in the SEC in order to fight to get in. Someone's got to finish 14th, 15th, and 16th in the SEC. I don't think it will be Vandy, but that schedule is really, really tough, Hakeem.
Again, 43 days away until Selection Sunday, and this will be a weekly theme here on CBS Sports HQ and CBSSports.com. We will do bracketology with the resident bracketologist himself, Jerry Palm, and Matt Norlander as well on CBS Sports HQ, taking you all the way from Selection Sunday to the Final Four in San Antonio.